When we focus too much on what others think, we begin to lose touch with ourselves. We become overly concerned with how we are perceived, constantly adjusting our behavior to fit the expectations of those around us. This often happens subtly without us even realizing it. At first it seems harmless, maybe even polite or considerate, but over time, it starts to shape our actions and choices in ways that don't reflect our true desires or values. The tendency to care too much about others' opinions can turn into a constant internal dialogue of self-monitoring. We begin to measure our worth by how well we conform to what others want or expect from us. It's as if we start to view ourselves through a lens of approval from others, rather than through the clarity of our own perception. This relentless pursuit of approval can lead us to make decisions based on fear of rejection, fear of conflict, or fear of disappointing others. We might hold back our true opinions or suppress our desires, opting instead for what is socially acceptable or pleasing to those around us. In doing so, we stop being the person we genuinely are and start being the person we think others want us to be. Ironically, the more we prioritize others' approval, the less authentic we become. Instead of fostering meaningful connections based on mutual respect and understanding, we end up creating a facade. We might think we are making people happy by always agreeing with them, by being accommodating and selfless, but in reality we are losing the opportunity to truly connect on a deeper level. This overcare can also drain us emotionally and mentally. Constantly molding ourselves to fit the expectations of others takes an immense amount of energy. It's exhausting to maintain an image that isn't entirely ours, to always put the needs of others ahead of our own, and to remain in a state of constant adaptation. Over time, this weariness leads to feelings of emptiness and confusion as we forget who we are and what we truly want from life. The real danger lies in how this pattern affects our sense of self-worth. If we are constantly seeking validation from others, we begin to define ourselves by how we are seen and accepted, rather than by our own intrinsic value. Our confidence becomes fragile, reliant on external factors, rather than the deep understanding of our own strengths and limitations. Imagine for a moment that you are a vessel, a container meant to hold something. But what if, instead of filling yourself with your own thoughts, desires, and experiences, you allow others to pour their expectations, demands, and needs into you? The more you try to please, the more you become filled with what others want from you, until eventually there is no space left for your own essence. This vessel is shaped not by its own form, but by what others choose to pour into it. It doesn't decide its shape or purpose, nor does it choose the contents it holds. It simply absorbs whatever is given to it. In the same way, when we prioritize others' desires above our own, we begin to lose sight of what makes us unique. We mold ourselves to fit the expectations around us, like water filling every crevice of the vessel's interior, leaving little room for the individuality that should define us. At first, this may feel natural, even necessary. After all, we are social beings, and we are often taught to be accommodating, to bend to the needs of others, to be flexible and adaptable. The idea of being a vessel, in a sense, seems almost noble. We imagine we are helping others by giving them space in our lives, by listening to their needs, and by supporting them in every way we can. However, as time goes on, the vessel starts to lose its original shape. The vessel might retain the outward appearance of wholeness, but inside it is filled with everything but itself. Its own form is no longer clear. This constant filling by others can also create a disconnection. Just as a vessel can become filled with substances that don't belong to it, we too begin to fill our lives with things that don't truly reflect our inner self's opinions, judgments, responsibilities, or desires that aren't ours. This leads to confusion, as we lose touch with what it is we actually want, who we actually are, and how we truly feel. The vessel's purpose becomes distorted, and it starts to feel empty, even though it is full. It has been filled, but with the wrong things. And here's the paradox: the more you allow others to fill your vessel, the more empty you might feel inside. You may find yourself constantly giving, constantly adjusting, and constantly trying to meet the expectations placed on you, but never truly receiving what you need to feel whole. You are not being filled with your own experiences, your own desires, your own truths. You are simply filled with what others wish to pour into you. Constant accommodation comes at a steep price, one that is often paid in silence and overlooked until the toll becomes too heavy to ignore. When we consistently put the needs of others ahead of our own, when we bend and mold ourselves to fit every situation, we are, in effect, denying ourselves the space to exist as we truly are. At first, this might seem like an act of kindness or selflessness, being there for others, meeting their expectations, making sure everyone is happy. But in truth, this constant accommodation erodes our sense of self over time. The first cost is emotional. When we say yes to everything, even when we don't want to, we begin to bury our own feelings and desires. We ignore the small voice inside that says, "This isn't right for me." And instead we focus on pleasing others, on fulfilling their needs, even when it comes at the expense of our own well-being. Over time, this emotional suppression can lead to frustration, resentment, and feelings of being unappreciated. We might start to wonder why we feel drained or disconnected, unaware that it's because we've been so focused on fulfilling the roles that others expect us to play, that we've lost sight of who we are. Then there is the cost to our identity. Each time we agree to something just to avoid conflict or to gain approval, we weaken our sense of individuality. Our identity becomes less about what we truly want and more about what others expect from us. We no longer act from a place of personal authenticity, but from the belief that our worth lies in pleasing others. We become actors in a play we didn't write, playing roles that weren't meant for us. Eventually, it becomes harder to recognize our own desires as they've been drowned out by the constant external noise. Who are we really when we no longer listen to our own needs? Physically, there is also a toll. Accommodation often comes with a sacrifice of energy, mental, emotional, and even physical. When we spend our time and resources trying to meet everyone's expectations, we burn ourselves out. The constant juggling of demands leaves us exhausted, running on empty, without the energy to take care of ourselves or to pursue our own interests. We might feel like we're always running a race, always trying to catch up, but never moving closer to our own goals or sense of fulfillment. Furthermore, the cost of constant accommodation often results in lost opportunities. When we are so focused on meeting everyone else's needs, we miss out on opportunities that could help us grow or take us in new directions. Whether it's saying yes to something that doesn't serve us or not taking the time to pursue something that matters to us, the more we accommodate others, the less time we have for the things that could truly nourish us. At its core, the cost of constant accommodation is a loss of authenticity. We begin to live for others, to fulfill their expectations, but never for ourselves. And in doing so, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to create a life that truly reflects who we are, our values, our desires, our passions. This quiet sacrifice accumulates over time. And while we might not notice it day to day, the long-term effect is a life that feels disconnected from our true purpose. We become shadows of ourselves, living lives defined by others, and in the process we forget the life we might have lived had we chosen to honor our own needs first. Self-sacrifice, when done mindlessly or excessively, often leads to a quiet erosion of who we truly are. The idea of putting others before ourselves can be noble, even virtuous, but only when done with mindfulness and balance. Too often, self-sacrifice is approached as an unquestioned obligation, a way to earn love or approval, rather than as a choice made from a place of deep understanding. In this process, we forget to ask, "What do I need?" instead of always asking, "What do others need from me?" Authenticity, on the other hand, begins with the simple act of acknowledging our own needs, desires, and limits. It's about standing in the truth of who we are and living in alignment with that truth, regardless of whether it pleases others. While authenticity certainly involves consideration for others, it does not require sacrificing ourselves at every turn in the hope of being liked, loved, or accepted. When we are authentic, we are honest about our capacity to give, about what we are willing to do, and about what we cannot do without losing touch with ourselves. The danger in self-sacrifice arises when it is done out of obligation rather than choice. We may sacrifice our own desires or even our well-being, thinking it is a sign of strength or goodness. But this kind of sacrifice is often rooted in fear, the fear of rejection, of not being good enough, or of being seen as selfish. And while it may seem like a way to earn approval, it often creates distance between us and others because it doesn't allow for the expression of our true selves. People are not connecting with the authentic version of us, but rather with a version that is tailored to fit their expectations. Authenticity requires us to be honest about our limitations. We cannot give endlessly without eventually depleting ourselves, and pretending that we can only sets us up for burnout, resentment, and disconnection. When we choose to honor our own needs, we are not being selfish, we are simply acknowledging that we are human, and that our energy, time, and emotions are finite. Authenticity is about being true to ourselves, even if it means disappointing others at times. It's about speaking up when something doesn't feel right and setting boundaries when necessary. When self-sacrifice takes precedence over authenticity, we risk losing our sense of self. We may start to act out of a sense of duty rather than genuine desire, and over time this creates a life that is not truly ours. We may look around one day and realize that we have been living according to the expectations of others, playing roles that don't reflect who we are or what we want. In contrast, authenticity requires us to confront difficult truths sometimes. We have to face the fact that we cannot please everyone, and that's okay. We are allowed to live a life that is true to ourselves, not one built around the approval of others. When we choose authenticity, we begin to understand that our value does not lie in how much we sacrifice for others, but in how honestly we live. It's about being real, expressing ourselves fully, and accepting that we have the right to our own desires and needs just as much as anyone else. Authenticity doesn't diminish our capacity to love and care for others, it enhances it, because it creates a foundation of honesty and integrity. From that foundation, we can offer our love and support freely, without the burden of self-sacrifice that leaves us feeling empty or resentful. Ultimately, the distinction between self-sacrifice and authenticity lies in the difference between doing something out of obligation and doing something because it aligns with our true values. True self-sacrifice, when it comes from a place of love and genuine desire, is a beautiful thing. But when it becomes a pattern of neglecting our own needs in order to please others, it becomes an act of diminishing ourselves. Authenticity, on the other hand, requires us to honor our own truth, even when it challenges the expectations of others, and to live a life that is not dictated by the need to constantly sacrifice our own identity. The idea of softness is often mistaken for weakness, for an inability to stand firm or assert oneself. But in reality, softness is not a passive state. It's not about being a doormat or constantly yielding to the demands of others. Softness, when misunderstood, becomes an illusion, a mask we wear to avoid conflict, to appear agreeable, and to keep the peace. The illusion lies in thinking that by being soft, by saying yes to everything, we are somehow more virtuous or more compassionate. But in truth, this softness may hide a deeper sense of fear or insecurity, a reluctance to confront discomfort, or a desire to be liked above all else. When we equate softness with kindness, we run the risk of confusing genuine compassion with an unhealthy form of people-pleasing. True kindness doesn't demand that we give up our own needs to meet the desires of others. It recognizes that, in order to truly help others, we must first be grounded in our own truth and values. The soft person, who always bends to others' wishes without ever setting boundaries, may appear kind on the surface, but they are often neglecting their own well-being and in the process becoming resentful. This form of softness isn't generosity, it's self-sacrifice driven by the need to avoid confrontation and seek external approval. Softness, in its truest form, isn't about constantly agreeing with everyone or avoiding difficult conversations. It's about being gentle in our approach, but strong in our resolve. It's about listening deeply to others without losing ourselves in the process. A truly soft person is able to meet others where they are without giving up their own identity or integrity. Softness means responding to life with openness and adaptability, not with a rigid need to control or please. However, when softness is used as a defense mechanism to avoid discomfort or conflict, it becomes a limiting illusion. The illusion of softness also manifests when we prioritize harmony at all costs, even when that harmony comes at the expense of truth. In relationships, whether personal or professional, we sometimes avoid necessary confrontation or difficult truths because we fear the discomfort that might arise from expressing our honest feelings. We might think that keeping the peace by being endlessly accommodating and soft is the best way to preserve relationships, but in doing so, we may end up distorting the relationship as it becomes based on false assumptions and unmet needs. Over time, this illusion of softness wears thin. It leaves us with a sense of inner tension. As we silently bear the weight of unspoken feelings or unmet desires, we might begin to feel disconnected from ourselves, unsure of what we truly want or need. This internal conflict grows as the gap widens between who we are and how we behave in the world. The more we suppress our true feelings, the more difficult it becomes to know what we actually want out of life, leading to a sense of confusion or lack of fulfillment. The real strength lies in knowing when to be soft and when to be firm. Softness becomes powerful when it is balanced with authenticity, the ability to express our thoughts and desires openly, without fear of judgment. It requires the courage to sometimes say no, to set clear boundaries, and to acknowledge when something doesn't serve us. True softness is not about avoiding conflict, it's about navigating life with grace while remaining rooted in our own truth. It involves being open to others, but also maintaining the strength to protect our own emotional space when necessary. The illusion of softness, when unchecked, leaves us feeling disconnected from our true selves, trapped in a cycle of constant accommodation. But when we understand that softness doesn't mean yielding to every demand, and that strength is found in embracing our own authenticity, we begin to experience a more genuine form of connection with others. It's a softness that doesn't come from fear, but from the deep assurance that we can stand firm in our truth and still offer love, compassion, and care. The danger of losing yourself is one that creeps up subtly, often without your realizing it, until the disconnection feels too deep to ignore. When we begin to prioritize the needs and desires of others over our own, we risk gradually dissolving the very essence of who we are. We shape our actions, thoughts, and decisions to fit into the mold of what others expect of us, and in doing so, we create a version of ourselves that is not truly ours. This version exists to meet the approval of others, to fulfill their expectations, but it does not live to fulfill our own. This gradual erosion of self often begins innocently. We make small compromises here and there, thinking they are harmless acts of kindness or politeness. We say yes when we mean no, agree when we disagree, and continue to push our own needs aside for the sake of harmony or to please others. At first, these sacrifices feel manageable, even virtuous. After all, we want to be helpful, kind, and accommodating. But over time, each small concession chips away at our sense of identity, leaving us less sure of what we really want or believe. The more we live for others, the more we disconnect from our own values and desires. We stop listening to our inner voice, the one that knows what we truly need and what will make us happy. Instead, we start listening to the voices of others, those around us, society's expectations, or the imagined opinions of people we wish to please. And as we bend to these external pressures, our own desires grow quieter, drowned out by the noise of the world. The danger of losing yourself is not just about feeling disconnected in the moment, it's about losing the ability to recognize what brings you joy, peace, and fulfillment. When you lose touch with yourself, you can end up living a life that is not yours at all. You follow paths that don't resonate with your soul, you pursue goals that don't align with your passions, and you build relationships that aren't based on genuine connection but on the desire to be accepted. This life can feel like a constant chase, always moving, but never arriving at a place that feels truly yours. In this state, you may also feel a sense of emptiness, a persistent longing for something that you can't quite identify. There is a feeling of being adrift, as if you're simply going through the motions without any real sense of purpose. You may find yourself wondering why you're unhappy, even though you seem to be living a life that others would consider successful or fulfilling. The truth is, you may be so far removed from your authentic self that you no longer recognize what would bring you true happiness. This disconnection can also lead to confusion about your boundaries. Without a clear sense of self, you may find it difficult to say no when something doesn't feel right, or to stand firm in your own beliefs and desires. The lines between what you want and what others want become blurred, and you end up giving more than you can without ever truly receiving anything in return. This kind of emotional depletion is draining. It takes everything out of you without filling you back up. Furthermore, when you lose yourself, you also lose the power to change course. You may feel trapped in a life that doesn't reflect who you are, unable to see a way out. This sense of being lost can affect every area of life: your career, your relationships, your goals, and even your sense of purpose. Without a solid foundation of self, it's difficult to make decisions that are aligned with your true nature, and you may find yourself stuck in patterns that don't serve you. The danger of losing yourself isn't always about dramatic, obvious changes. Often, it's a slow, insidious process that happens in small increments, each concession, each moment of self-neglect adding up until one day you realize you've lost touch with the very person you were meant to be. But there is hope in recognizing this danger early. By becoming aware of the subtle shifts that pull you away from yourself, you can begin to reclaim your identity, set boundaries, and reconnect with your true desires. This reconnection takes time and effort, but it is the path to living a life that feels meaningful, authentic, and fully your own. Boundaries are often seen as rigid walls that separate us from others, but in truth, they are the essential lines of self-respect and self-care that allow us to function authentically in the world. At their core, boundaries are not about pushing people away or shutting ourselves off from others. They are about creating a healthy space where we can protect our emotional, mental, and physical well-being. Without boundaries, we can easily become overwhelmed, resentful, and disconnected from ourselves. Boundaries are the invisible threads that keep us grounded in who we are, what we value, and what we need. When we fail to set clear boundaries, we run the risk of becoming enmeshed with others, losing our own identity in the process. We may start to adopt the needs, desires, and expectations of those around us as our own, and in doing so, we neglect our own well-being. Without boundaries, we may feel like we are constantly giving, constantly compromising, and constantly adjusting to fit the needs of others. In doing so, we lose the space to nourish our own inner selves, and we become emotionally depleted. The importance of boundaries becomes particularly evident when we consider how easily our time and energy can be consumed by the demands of others. Whether it's a friend asking for a favor, a colleague needing extra help, or a family member requiring emotional support, it's easy to fall into the trap of saying yes to every request. While helping others is important, without boundaries, we risk overextending ourselves. We may feel obligated to say yes to everything, even when it doesn't serve us, and this constant self-sacrifice leaves us exhausted, overwhelmed, and feeling taken advantage of. Setting boundaries is not about being selfish, it's about protecting the space where we can recharge and give from a place of abundance rather than depletion. Boundaries also protect our emotional health. In relationships, it's easy to let others' moods, opinions, and behaviors affect us deeply, especially when we care about them. However, without clear emotional boundaries, we may find ourselves taking on the weight of others' emotions, letting their stress, anger, or sadness overwhelm our own sense of peace. When we set emotional boundaries, we acknowledge that we can empathize with others without absorbing their feelings. This helps us maintain our emotional equilibrium and allows us to support others without losing ourselves in the process. Another aspect of boundaries is the ability to say no. Learning to say no is one of the most powerful tools we have for preserving our time and energy. Many of us have been conditioned to feel guilty or selfish when we decline a request. But the truth is that saying no is an act of self-respect. It communicates that we value our own time, energy, and needs. Saying no allows us to prioritize what is truly important, whether it's spending time with loved ones, pursuing personal goals, or simply taking time for self-care. When we say yes to everything, we say no to the things that truly matter to us. Boundaries also foster healthier relationships. When we set clear, respectful boundaries, we communicate to others that we have our own needs and limits. This not only helps us protect our own well-being, but also teaches others how to treat us. Healthy boundaries help us avoid situations where we feel manipulated or taken advantage of, and they allow us to build relationships based on mutual respect and understanding. When both parties respect each other's boundaries, relationships become more balanced, supportive, and genuine. Another reason boundaries are crucial is that they help us maintain a sense of control over our lives. In a world that often demands more than we can give, boundaries allow us to take back the power over our own decisions and actions. They help us define what we are willing to accept and what we are not. Without boundaries, we can feel like we are at the mercy of external circumstances, constantly reacting, constantly giving, and never taking time to reflect on what we truly want or need. The importance of boundaries extends to our sense of self-worth. When we fail to set boundaries, we inadvertently teach others that our time, energy, and emotions are not as important as theirs. This undermines our self-esteem, as we begin to believe that our needs are secondary to others. By setting clear boundaries, we demonstrate that we value ourselves, and we reinforce the idea that our needs matter just as much as anyone else's. This helps us build a strong sense of self-worth, where we can stand firm in our own truth and make choices that align with our values and desires. Ultimately, boundaries are about creating a space where we can thrive as individuals while maintaining healthy connections with others. They are the foundation of a balanced, fulfilling life, where we can give generously without losing ourselves and where we can connect authentically without compromising our own well-being. Boundaries allow us to navigate the complexities of relationships, work, and personal life in a way that honors who we are, what we need, and how we want to show up in the world. Living with integrity is about aligning our actions, words, and values in a way that is true to who we are at our core. It is the practice of being consistent in our principles, regardless of external pressures or circumstances. Integrity requires honesty, not only with others but with ourselves. It means living authentically, expressing our truth, and making decisions that reflect our deepest values, even when it is difficult or uncomfortable. To live with integrity is to live in a way that feels congruent with who we are, without pretending, without wearing masks, and without compromising our own beliefs to fit into what is expected by others. At the heart of integrity is the idea of being whole, undivided. When we live with integrity, we don't split ourselves into different versions based on who we are with. We don't change our personality or compromise our values depending on the situation or the people around us. The integrity that comes from being whole means that our inner world matches our outer world. We can stand in front of anyone in any circumstance and be the same person. This level of authenticity creates a deep sense of inner peace, because there is no conflict between who we are and how we present ourselves. Integrity also involves taking responsibility for our actions. It means acknowledging when we make mistakes, owning up to them, and learning from them rather than denying, avoiding, or blaming others. Integrity isn't about being perfect, it's about being real, transparent, and accountable. It's about showing up with humility and a willingness to learn, and it requires us to be honest even when it's uncomfortable. This sense of responsibility creates trust in relationships because people can count on us to be reliable and truthful, and they know that we are willing to own our mistakes and correct them. Another vital aspect of living with integrity is the courage to do what is right, even when no one is watching. Integrity isn't about public approval or seeking recognition for our good deeds. It's about making choices that align with our values, regardless of whether we will receive praise or face consequences. Living with integrity means standing firm in our moral compass, even when it's inconvenient, unpopular, or when the easier choice might be to follow the crowd. This courage to do what is right, even when it's hard, strengthens our sense of self-worth because we know we are true to ourselves and we honor the principles that guide us. It also means being consistent in our principles, not bending them to suit our needs or desires. In a world where shortcuts and compromises may seem like the easiest route, integrity asks us to stay committed to the standards we set for ourselves. Whether it's honoring our word, being transparent in our communication, or treating others with respect and fairness, living with integrity requires that we hold ourselves accountable to the highest standard, even when it seems like it would be easier to take the path of least resistance. Integrity also strengthens our relationships. When we live with integrity, we create a space where others feel safe to be authentic and true themselves as well. People are drawn to those who are grounded in their values, who consistently act with honesty, and who live according to their principles. Integrity builds trust, and trust is the foundation of all meaningful relationships. Whether in personal or professional settings, when we are true to ourselves and our values, we foster deeper connections with those around us. Others feel seen, heard, and respected in our presence, and we are able to build relationships that are authentic, open, and reliable. Living with integrity means protecting our inner truth even when it might be tempting to conform to external pressures. In today's world, there are countless influences that try to sway us from our values, society's expectations, the desire for approval, the pressure to fit in. It's easy to get caught up in these external forces and start compromising on what we believe. But when we live with integrity, we resist these external pressures even when they are strong, and we remain rooted in our authentic self. This inner strength comes from knowing who we are, what we stand for, and what we refuse to compromise on. At its core, living with integrity is about self-respect. It is about honoring ourselves enough to live authentically, to make decisions that align with our values, and to stay true to the person we are at our core. Integrity is not something we simply do, it is something we embody. It becomes the foundation of our actions, our decisions, and our relationships. When we live with integrity, we align our inner world with our outer reality, and in doing so, we create a life that is rich with meaning, authenticity, and trust. Integrity allows us to walk through the world with confidence, knowing that we are true to ourselves, and it gives us the courage to face whatever challenges come our way, because we know that we are living a life that is in alignment with our deepest values. In the end, living with integrity is not just a choice, it is a way of being that shapes every aspect of our lives. It allows us to align our actions, words, and values in a way that fosters authenticity, trust, and genuine connection with others. By staying true to ourselves, taking responsibility for our actions, and remaining steadfast in our principles, we build a life that feels whole and meaningful. Integrity isn't about perfection, it's about consistency, courage, and self-respect. When we live with integrity, we not only honor our own truth, but also create a space where others can do the same. Ultimately, it is through living with integrity that we find peace, purpose, and a deep sense of fulfillment in both our personal and our shared experiences.